Hey everybody, my name is Paul Eston Jr., aka Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com. We're streaming live simultaneously in 3 different places. The Heavy on Jets Facebook page to over 25,000 you crazy gosh darn Jet fans. On my YouTube channel, youtube.com/BoyGreen25. Make sure you do a drive-by like and subscribe, if you will, to support the show. And on Twitter, of course, as well, at BoyGreen25. And folks, well, it's a mock draft Monday. What am I to tell you? We're already here. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. But I have something to, boost the mood, to bring you some juice here on a friggin' Monday. And this is one of the best guys in the business. His name, not that he needs some sort of introduction, but Trevor gosh darn Sikkema, baby. He's the host of It's Just Football, the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, both brought to you by Pro Football Focus, and he's the face that runs the place. Let's bring him in the building. Trevor gosh darn Sikkema, baby. Woo! What's up, Trevor?
Paul, you give the best intros of literally any podcast that I've ever been on. So I love the enthusiasm, love the energy, love to be talking draft. I know Jets fans wish they were talking playoffs instead of draft, but hey, it's okay. The team is very close. The team is getting very, very close. And I think here on this show, we're going to talk about how to get them over that playoff hump. So I'm excited to be here, man. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And this is going to be, guys, a first look mock draft Mondays. Again, I'm sure a lot of us wish this would have been kicked down a few more weeks down the road, but quite frankly, this is probably the latest we've ever waited to do some mock draft Monday content. So actually, I guess not too shabby at the end of the day. And Trevor, with that being said, the Jets hold the number 13 overall pick in the first round of the 2023 NFL draft. This will be the fourth time they've held this selection in the modern draft era. So we'll see what the heck they could potentially do with this thing. And first things first, I got to go to the royalty, which is the Trevor Sikkema 1.0 mock draft baby. And I know that the Jets did not have do not have the same pick now that they had then. But the guy you gave the New York gosh darn Jets is Paris Johnson Jr., the offensive tackle at Ohio State. And Trevor, we already like it. I know you normally get lit up like a Christmas tree when you send this mock draft out, but building a gosh darn wall is not a bad place to start for the New York gosh darn Jets, baby.
Yeah, I think that Paris Johnson Jr. would be great for them because certainly I don't think the poor play in the trenches has been from lack of trying, right? They've brought in free agents. They've done what they've could, sometimes on short notice. They've put draft resources into the trenches, and it hasn't been able to work out because of timing, because of injuries, because of things like that. And I think a lot of this, circles around what's going to happen with Mekhi Becton. And I think they need another offensive tackle anyways, but in theory, all of a sudden, if you get a guy like Paris Johnson Jr., who is the left tackle at Ohio State this year, played right guard the previous season and played it very well, so he's got a lot of versatility and just how good of an overall offensive lineman he is. But if you draft him, not only does it allow you to have flexibility position-wise, also, if Mekhi Becton comes back, fully healthy, plays great, phenomenal. You get to play him at one of the offensive tackle spots. And then you can put Paris Johnson Jr. at the other. You can use Elijah Vera Tucker on the inside, and all of it, that's just a really good offensive line. It's a much improved offensive line right off the bat. If you can't rely on Mekhi Becton, if he continues to stay injured, if he doesn't play well, whatever it is, then you have the insurance right there. We know Elijah Vera Tucker can kick out the tackle sometimes if needed, but you'd like for him to be an interior guy. If you drafted a Paris Johnson Jr., then you could have somebody who could be that left tackle for you that you could bring in on a young rookie contract to be able to develop in so many different ways. So I just think there's a lot of flexibility with this pick. Now, beyond Paris Johnson Jr. specifically, it's a pretty good offensive tackle class in the first round. You got Broderick Jones as well from Georgia, who I like. Peterskoronski as well from Northwestern. Anton Harrison is a really nice pass blocker. Thinks he needs a little bit more strength in his game, but he's somebody who's played for a really long time now, three years starting as a left tackle at Oklahoma. So feels like there's a lot of good offensive tackles to choose from. Picking at 13, you'd hope to get your pick of the litter, maybe offensive tackle 1, maybe offensive tackle 2, something like that. And I just think that they're in range for Paris Johnson Jr. So it makes a lot of sense if they could get their hands on him.
And going back to your mock draft 1.0, in that scenario, the Jets got the second whack at the pinata because the first guy was Peterskoronski. As you mentioned, he went earlier in the mock. Is there a clear-cut number one guy? Because I've heard some people, especially on the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, wink, all that brought to you by, that with Peterskoronski, I've heard some people say he's going to be an inside player. So is there a clear-cut number one guy, and then potentially, to your point, that the Jets maybe gets that taste of if they're still sitting there at 13? Is there a number one guy that you think right now?
I mean, I think Skoronski is a number one guy. I really do. Back-to-back seasons of him playing left tackle and playing it really, really well. Yeah, the arm length's probably going to be shorter than what a lot of teams like. Some teams have thresholds of arm length for offensive tackles that you go, okay, we don't really want a guy who's got shorter arms in this because it tells us that they're going to struggle a little bit with some of the longer armed pass rushers they'll go up against in the NFL. So there's going to be those concerns with Peterskoronski, but the tape is great. I mean, he's such a damn good offensive lineman. He came to Northwestern as a center prospect. So just to give you guys a background on what his measurables were, it's not like he came in as a tackle. He came in as an interior offensive lineman. They kicked him out to left tackle because they really needed it there the last 2 years, and he's played it beautifully. He's been a shutdown guy. Of course, Northwestern, not the best competition they're playing week in and week out, but he's been a stone wall, man, and he is somebody who, a lot like Brady Christensen, I would say was in the same situation from BYU. Brady Christensen played really, really well at BYU as an offensive tackle. And he got drafted by the Carolina Panthers, and they're like, nah, we think that he's more of a guard. And he played guard, and he wasn't that impactful. And then they actually let him play tackle a little bit, and it's like, oh, yeah, he's good at it because he already showed you he's good at it. So, I mean, there was a little bit of that, and I think that that's kind of a similar situation with Skoronski, where I think Skoronski is even better than Brady Christensen was, but it's kind of a similar thing where I would draft this guy with the expectation that he could play well at tackle. And at worst, I feel like you have a damn good interior offensive lineman. Now, you don't want to take the stab and say like, you're settling for a guy that you're picking as an interior offensive lineman at number 13 in the draft. You want this guy to be an offensive tackle. But just because of how well Skoronski has played over the last 2 years, he would be my consensus one. But there are going to be teams who look at a Broderick Jones, who look at a Paris Johnson Jr., and just look at those guys' measurables, their physical profiles, and say, I'd rather bet on that as an offensive tackle guy. So feels like there's a clear number one for me, but I think the NFL is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a lot more pick your preference, if you will.
Well, you mentioned the center position for Skoronski coming in. Well, the Jets are probably going to need one of those. Connor McGovern is a pending free agent for the New York Jets. He's been fine. I mean, he's been meh. I wouldn't introduce him to my mom or anything, but I mean, he's good enough, certainly, to get the job done if you are in that realm in terms of the New York Jets on the offensive line. But again, getting a potential upgrade, I think, is pretty important to the process as well, and trying to find a way to potentially make that happen from the center position. So, going to you, Trevor, on this, is it possible that there is a center guy that the Jets can go to in all this? Because Jet fans have dreamed the last couple of years. They went, ooh, Tyler Linderbaum would be nice. Saw him go to somebody else. Creed Humphrey was a big one a couple of years ago where Jet fans said, oh, that'd be nice. And they've just seen successful guys go to other places. So is there a center guy in those same breaths, or even someone different potentially that could fill the hole for the Jets at the center position in this draft?
I feel like the guy that everybody's going to point to is John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota. I guess he feels like the best center prospect to pick from. Now, I think that he'll probably be an early day 2 pick, but again, like, center is kind of one of those things where you certainly don't have to worry about it in the first round. You looked at a guy like Tyler Linderbaum, who was about as good as it was, and he's not even a guy who went super high as a first round pick. A lot of people, I know, my co-host at NFL Stock Exchange podcast, Connor Rogers, I'll play it safe and say that he had Tyler Linderbaum as a top 10 prospect in the class. I think he was top 5. But yeah, I think he was top 5 for him, honestly. But it just goes to show you, like, those guys are just drafted a lot later. So you can get a good center prospect a little bit later. But I think as I'm kind of looking at the list now, guys that you would be okay with drafting and maybe starting in a rookie season, I feel like John Michael Schmitz is probably the target player that you would want to get sometime in day 3. I'm not so sure if the Jets are going to go like offensive lineman in the first round and then like offensive lineman in the second. It would probably be a gap. And if you would have to wait to the 3rd round, he might not be there. But that would just be my first thoughts when you ask about center guys.
Sure. Let's go to a couple other positions in which the Jets could address with the draft. We'll go to other couple areas here as well. Trevor, I'm going to be honest. The safety position was an absolute disaster this year. We stole your boy Jordan Whitehead from Tampa Bay. Thank you very
Mm-hmm.
much. But
Mm-hmm.
there was I don't know if our expectations were here and then he was here, so then maybe we bit off more than we could chew as Jet fans in terms of what we were expecting out of him. But that was underwhelming. LaMarcus Joyner was underwhelming. So what's the safety class look like, whether in terms of its top 1% or its depth, because that's definitely a trouble area for the New York Jets heading into this offseason?
Well, safety is such a versatile position, right? You have guys who are labeled as safeties, and sometimes they can play completely different roles. Whitehead, certainly when he was in Tampa, I can't say that I've ever watched every snap of him when he was with the Jets, but like a strong safety type, like a guy who would come down into the box, who would be a physical presence for you. And I think there are a handful of guys that you could be okay with filling that role. Like a Jordan Battle from Alabama, a JL Skinner from Boise State. Like I'm just looking at a handful of players, right? Like a Chris Smith from Georgia. These guys who are all labeled good safeties, I would say, in this draft, but they kind of fill that same role as Whitehead does. Then you look at the top, like a guy like Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M, a guy like Brian Branch, especially, who I think is probably going to be my safety one in this class. Those are more like slot safeties. Like those are guys who, yes, they technically have the safety label, but you're putting them at nickel cornerback a lot. They're a lot of in coverage. Now, if you wanted more of a free safety, back end guy, I'm trying to think of who might be the best.
Yeah, because we need turnovers. We need someone that can create turnovers. That was a big issue, a trouble area for the Jets in the second half of the season. A guy who could take away the friggin' football.
Yeah, Brandon Joseph is somebody I like from Notre Dame. I liked his ability to do that when he was at Northwestern, although I do worry a little bit about the athleticism. He's just really smart on the back end. He understands spacing and how to bait quarterbacks into throwing it deep where he can cut on it and really get across the field and get to the sideline and make things happen. But sometimes the athleticism's not always there for it. So I do worry about that a little bit with him. Jair Brown, I guess I'll shout him out. A guy who I really do like as an athlete on the back end. I feel like he is somebody who could potentially play the free safety role at the NFL level because he is a pretty damn good athlete on the back end. So I guess, I don't think the Jets are drafting a safety in the first round or anything, but as you get a little bit further back, in that third, fourth round range, I think probably third round feels like a good area. But Jair Brown from Penn State, just a really good athlete player, might be able to give you something as a free safety to complement what you've got in Jordan Whitehead.
All right, let's give a big circle on that one. Let's, of course, stay on the defensive side of the ball, the linebacker position. The Jets have C.J. Mosley, probably because of contract. He stuck with the Jets in 2023. They also have two pending free agents. Quincy Williams has been a nice find. He was ditched on the side of the road by the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jets dusted him off, threw him in. He's looked pretty good. We'll see if the Jets re-sign him. And Quan Alexander, who was had for a bag of peanuts in training camp, and for the first time since 2016, he started a full season. Another Tampa Bay guy. I guess we're just raiding your pantry if we're just going to be blunt on what's going on here, Trevor Sikkema. But what about linebackers? Again, the Jets need, at a minimum, at least one body, if not multiple, this offseason, trying to fill some voids. Who are some linebackers you like?
There's a lot of linebackers to like in this class. I'm not sure there's like that first round caliber major difference maker that you're going to take in the first round, but certainly it doesn't feel like the Jets are going to take a linebacker in the first round, certainly not at number 13 overall. So that kind of plays into the strength of this linebacker class, plays into what the Jets draft strategy might be. You've got a guy like Trenton Simpson from Clemson who is a pretty damn good athlete for the linebacker position. He's built a little bit lighter, but he gives you a ton of speed in that regard to chase ball carriers and play well in coverage. Drew Sanders, the linebacker from Arkansas, I think is somebody who's rising up a lot of draft boards, who's going to get a lot of great looks this offseason as we go through the draft process. Jack Campbell from Iowa, he's that kind of like true, it feels like middle linebacker type who is just like the centerpiece of a defense. He's been the centerpiece of that Iowa defense. So he's somebody that you like. Demarion Overshone is a really uniquely built linebacker where he's kind of skinny, he's kind of long, but he plays almost like a mysterious pass rusher at times, going up to the line of scrimmage and going up the A gap or coming off the edge or whatever it is. And he's also got some good range and coverage too. I believe he was a former safety. But then you've got guys a little bit further down, like a Henry To'o who played linebacker at Tennessee. Then he played linebacker at Alabama. Nice athlete of a player. Has to improve his anticipation, but he's got the athleticism to be really great if that kind of clicks for him. Owen Papo from Auburn is the same way. Another guy who's got a really good athleticism, a ton of experience playing in the SEC, who could be I would say, mid-round linebacker for you to get and probably play into that rotation. But Ivan Pace Jr. is another guy from Cincinnati who I think a lot of people really love just because of his unique build. He's got like this. I don't want to say like a bowling ball build, but he's not this super long guy. He's just like super strong. Like he looks super dense. He's somebody who attacks the line of scrimmage ferociously. We talk about a Quan Alexander type. If you want like a younger Quan Alexander guy to play like a Sam linebacker role and just crash into the line of scrimmage, I feel like Ivan Pace is a good guy for that. So there's a lot of different linebackers, and like we've seen with so many different positions on defense over the last, say, half decade, there's a lot of different shapes and sizes about how you could deploy linebackers and how you could prioritize linebackers. So it just kind of depends what flavor they're going for. But there's a decent amount of linebackers to like in this class, especially for the mid rounds.
Again, we're sugar Trevor Sikkema. Look at that handsome stud. Make sure you're following him on Twitter, of course, at Tampa Bay Trey. If you're not already, we have no idea what the hell you're doing out there of Pro Football Focus. It's just football, NFL Stock Exchange, whatever you want. He's got it. And make sure you guys check it out, of course. So we got to go to the other position. And I wasn't sure if I was even going to put this in the draft pool, but obviously quarterback. The Jets, the only quarterback under contract for the Jets in 2023 currently is Zach Wilson. And there is much to be desired from that standpoint. Mike White, Chris Strebler, Joe Flacco, all those bastards are free agents. So they got to do something at the quarterback position. And Trevor, I noticed that the Chicago Bears landed the number 1 pick, and I've heard a few Jet fans sliding in the DM saying, Bryce Young, ? CJ Stroud. And I'm like, you crazy guys are just addicted to drafting quarterbacks and seeing what's going to happen. I mean, to me, quite frankly, I want to go in the veteran route, but there's been enough Jet fans who have been reaching out to me that I had to bring this up on the show. Is Bryce Young, in your opinion, Mr. Trevor Sikkema, worthy enough of being traded up for and being that absolute difference maker in the NFL?
I had not heard of this scenario, and honestly, I felt bad for Houston Texans fans. I really did. But I was also excited for the Bears to get the number 1 overall pick because we're going to get to have so many conversations like this. I didn't even think of the Jets potentially going up to number 1 overall, literally until you just said that. And in my head, I'm like, no, they're going to sign a veteran. The roster's ready to compete right away. Like, they'll sign a veteran, they'll be good. And then, like, I'm sitting here thinking about him. Wait a second. I mean, Bryce Young with the Jets. I mean, it's huge. I mean, it's just that's such a great. Oh man, I would actually love that. Now, ultimately, I don't think it happens because it would
of course.
The problem with New York getting up to number 1 is the Indianapolis Colts at 4, the Las Vegas Raiders at 7, and the Carolina Panthers at 9 are 3 teams that are going to drive up the price with an already earlier pick in this year's first round draft. So for the Jets to move up from 13 to 1, it's going to cost them like 3 first round picks. And I just don't think that Joe Douglas is about to do that. Even for a guy who I really like in Bryce Young, I don't think that that's going to happen. I do agree with you. Ultimately, I think that they go the veteran quarterback route. I don't think Zach Wilson's on the team next year. I mean, you can listen to everything that the coaching staff or whatever has said. They're trying to be positive about Zach Wilson, like, oh, he's his best balls ahead of him. We're not giving up on Zach Wilson. If you bring in a veteran quarterback, or even if you draft a quarterback, like, I think Zach Wilson's presence is just going to be a negative no matter what. Because I personally think his time is up in New York. I don't think that he is. If he's going to succeed in his NFL career, it's not going to be with the New York Jets. So if that's going to be the case, why give anyone the whispers behind their back of like, like put Zach Wilson in. This quarterback's a bum. Like he's being bad. Like just see what Zach Wilson's got. Maybe he's better because after he sat for a while. There's just no need to put that out in the world, even make that a possibility. So I think they're going to move on from him. And I think that ultimately it's going to be a veteran who's going to be under center to potentially take this team to the playoffs next year.
Let's get crazy, Trevor. Let's just get crazy, okay? Because there's a lot of scenarios now that the Bears have the number 1 overall pick. Let's say this. What if the Bears say, F it? Bryce Young is coming to Chicago. All of a sudden, Justin Fields is available. More Jet fans said, hey, man, you shouldn't have passed on Justin Fields the first time anyway. He's an intriguing guy, and put him on an offense with Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and God knows what else. Could that be interesting? I mean, I'm just, it just hit me. I'm kind of like, you know what? That's so crazy. It just might work. Is there anything there and any idea on what the heck that could possibly cost?
It kind of depends what the price is, certainly. Because no matter what, the Bears are going to have a trade on their hands. Whether they're trading the number one overall pick to a team that wants to go up and get a quarterback, or if some reason they wanted Bryce Young really badly, and then one of those teams is going to try to trade for Justin Fields because of the year that he had this past year. I think they're going to have a trade on their heads either way. I love Fields, and I think I hope Fields is going to be awesome. But we've got to be honest that where he was so incredible with his legs, he still didn't really take that next step as a passer, at least where you would want to go.
Right.
I don't know if it makes sense for the Jets to go after that. I guess it all depends on the price. All depends on the price, certainly. But I would be a little bit worried if I was the Jets to spend more draft assets for Justin Fields, and then what if he just doesn't develop as a passer? Then all of a sudden you're wasting the because their playoff window is now, right? The Jets playoff window is right now. You can't really have another year for Justin Fields to kind of maybe he's learning as a passer, because then you're just going to barely miss out on the playoffs again. And then the following year, you're going to have to start signing new guys with contracts, and things got to move, and the roster's got to change a lot. So I feel like you got to get somebody a little bit more proven. For as much as I love Justin Fields and the talent that he has, certainly it depends on the price, but I feel like you'd rather go get a proven veteran.
All right, Trevor, what's the answer? I heard actually you and your boy, Mike Renner, again, It's Just Football, looks at camera, that, when you look at, the quarterbacks you guys were talking about potentially who could fill the void for the Jets, again, if the Jets are as close as you believe they are and they're a quarterback away, then they got to swing for a guy. And if you swing for a guy, you don't get multiple whacks, right? Like if you get Derek Carr, you can't get Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. So whoever they pick, they got to have a level of conviction with whoever they pick, and whoever they pick is the guy. Trevor Sikkema, if you're running the operation, who's the right guy? I think there's a case to be made for a bunch of different guys, but who is the right fit in terms of acquisition cost and what he would bring the team? Because the Jets are trying to win now, but who is the right quarterback to help them win now?
Yeah, certainly if Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady are available and it's plausible, you're going to take those guys over anybody just because of the playoff experience that they have. Even if it's a short-term thing, like a 1 or 2 year thing, You're probably going to end up doing that. The Jimmy Garoppolo one obviously makes sense because he's going to be a free agent, so you don't have to spend a draft pick to get him. You just have to spend money financially for him to get there. We know that he's got the connection with LaFleur and Saleh, and so that familiarity is there, and that's good. Is Jimmy G enough to get you over the mountaintop? Are you going to be okay with that? I think those are the big questions there. I like Derek Carr. I think that Derek Carr going to the New York Jets is a recipe for the playoffs. I really do. He struggled in Las Vegas, but I mean, I'm not going to say that he was blameless. He wasn't in any way, shape, or form, especially this year. It was a disappointing year from him. But over the course of while Derek Carr has been with the Raiders, they have had an awful defense, and for the most part, they have not put the right offensive line or even playmakers around him. It just hasn't happened. Every year, it's been something with them, and they've been a fringe playoff team, it feels like, for a really long time because of Carr. He has his mistakes, but you put those mistakes on a team like the New York Jets, they're probably playing in the playoffs this weekend, right? So I think
that's true.
So I think that even though you would have to trade for him, it's not going to cost you a first-round pick. You're not going to have to garner a first-round pick. He's got too much money left on his contract. But I think the Jets would be okay with it. It's $34 million on the cap next year, and then it goes up to 40 and 40. It goes up to 42
Correct.
and 43 the next 2 years
Correct.
after that.
Yep.
But I mean, you could even get creative with it, right? Do the same thing that we saw for the Carson Wentz trades, where you say, hey, we'll give you a 3rd round pick in this year's draft and a 2nd round pick. We'll give you a 3rd round pick in this year's draft and a 3rd round pick in next year's draft. If they make the playoffs and Derek Carr hits these incentives, both of those turn into 2nd round picks. And it just flips immediately, because then it's risk free, right? Derek Carr is the quarterback that you love, and he's the quarterback that is going to get you to the playoffs and gives you a chance to compete in the AFC. You don't give a damn if you don't have 2 2nd round picks. You got the quarterback. Right. So that's where my head goes with Carr. I don't know where he's going to end up, and I think he technically has a no trade clause, so he does get to decide where he wants to go. But certainly I think that playing for the Jets is something that he would love to do. It feels like a great roster, feels like a great head coach, and they're going in the right direction. And so I would just, if I was the Jets, Carr still seems like my top option, realistic top option, because I have no idea what Brady and Rodgers are going to do. and just put a little stipulation with the trade wherever you're trading them, and just make it worthwhile for you, mitigate the risk, and I think you can make it happen.
That makes a lot of sense. By the way, I'm on the Derek Carr train too, but ask 10 Jet fans, and 7 of them hate Derek Carr for some reason. I'm like, all right, look at some of your past girlfriend history, pal, before you start getting too judgmental, before you get a little too, high on your horses. A couple of quickies before we get you out of here, Trevor. This one, I don't even know if you're going to have an answer to, but I am compelled to ask based on, again, fan pressure. I am peer pressured all the time into questions. It's something I'm seeing my therapist about. But, Mike LaFleur has struggled as the Jets offensive coordinator. And a lot of people have been trying to figure out who's the right guy to come in, because Michael LaFleur, before getting hired, had never called plays before in his life. And they just think that he got the job based on his last name. Cliff Kingsbury was just fired earlier today. Former Jets quarterback, by the way, for trivia night, for anyone who didn't know that fun fact off the top of their head. But Cliff Kingsbury, Frank Reich, Gary Kubiak, some old guy that has some connection to Salah. Like, who is the guy that can kind of, bring this offense, because the pieces seem to be there. Garrett Wilson seems pretty good. Breece Hall seems pretty good. The fact that they didn't score a touchdown in the final 3 games of the season is somehow impressive. Like, how the hell did that not happen? How did a ball not just bounce into the end zone? Like, I mean, quite frankly, it's stunning that couldn't happen in those 3 games, especially when everything that was on the line. So the Cliff Kingsbury thing, does that titillate you at all, or any of those names for that matter?
I think Cliff's certainly going to be an offensive coordinator before he's a head coach again, especially at the NFL level. I don't know, man. It just feels like even what he was doing when he had Kyler and what they were doing when he had DeAndre Hopkins, like, it felt like they had so much control over who was in and out of that roster, and it just still didn't work. So I don't know. I know that Cliff is obviously a flashy name. That's why he's been able to move up the ladder, both at the college level and at the NFL level, despite not really having success. But I'd be wary of that one. It's not like Cliff can't figure it out. I do think that he knows a ton about offense, and maybe the next step will be the one that really it works out for him. But it did not really work out with Arizona. The trajectory was going up a little bit, and then this year it definitely took a major nosedive. So I would just be wary of that one. I know people like the big name signings and things like that, but I'd be wary of that one.
Yeah, that's very fair. And to end it on this, Trevor, in the bio, when I go to trevorsikkema.com, the bio says draft guy. So, Trevor, I have to ask you, the 2022 NFL draft, the Jets might have the offensive rookie of the year and defensive rookie of the year. God only knows. I ask you, from what you thought these players were in college to what you thought they were going to be on the Jets to what they actually were in this draft class, I need a different perspective. We hear from Jets people all the time. Trevor, you're just a both Tampa Bay Buccaneers and NFL draft guy overall, but like an outside perspective, what say you about this class and the potential that it has moving forward for this Jets with this playoff window and beyond?
Just unbelievable. And then you throw Breece Hall into that as well. You get a full healthy season out of him. He could have been competitive for offensive rookie of the year. So it just, I mean, it was a home run class. I think Jermaine Johnson's also going to be great. I really do. I think he's going to come along on it. It's already a good defensive line, and I just think that he's definitely going to find his way over the next couple of years to be a major difference maker there. Feels like a home run class for him. I like Sauce Gardner going into the NFL. Even the people who like Sauce Gardner the most would have told you that this is impossible. He's playing like a top 3 cornerback in the league. Cornerback, I would say, after quarterback, is the hardest position to come in and start right away. And he's playing it at an elite level. It's unheard of. I cannot remember any corner who has ever come close to doing what he has been able to do this year. Unbelievable success and an impact on that defense. Then Garrett Wilson, I think Garrett Wilson was my wide receiver 5. I know he's a lot of people's wide receiver 1, and I wanted to preface that by saying those top 5 wide receivers that I had, I think it was Drake London, Jameson Williams, George Pickens, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. I think Garrett Wilson was 5. And then Jahan Dotson was 6. All 6 of those wide receivers, I mean, I had in my top 50. Like, these guys were going to be major difference makers. The thing that worried me with Garrett Wilson is his calling card was always the short area quickness, the body control, that kinds of stuff. And I was like, man, is he enough of a straight line athlete to really continue to have that separation athletically at the NFL level. He is. That was a question mark that I thought I had about his game that he answered incredibly early on, and just has had an unbelievable season with over 1,100 yards this year. So he was even better than I thought that he was going to be coming out. Sauce Gardner certainly is as well. I think that has to be the case for everyone with how well he played. And just an unbelievable job by Joe Douglas to really slingshot this roster into competitive nature with those picks.
I love that. I love that word, slingshot them for. That's very nice. And by the way, Garrett Wilson's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen with the separation at the line of scrimmage. His Gumby, almost basketball crossover. Yes. He has the basketball history, of course. It's just weird, man. I've never seen anything like it. I feel like sometimes we say that in NFL draft world leading up to something that like, wow, I've never seen that before. But like, it almost feels crazy to say when you see Garrett Wilson. So an incredible ceiling, and hopefully they have a quarterback to throw them the football to both Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and everybody else on that team. Well, Trevor, I want to thank you so much for carving out the time where, for some teams we're just starting draft season. You and Connor have been doing God's work on the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, of course, setting us all up for what is going to be draft season as teams are eliminated and then they jump into the pool with you guys to get this thing ready. But we appreciate you kicking off officially, and somewhat unfortunately, I guess, the Jets mock draft season as we look forward here to a very intense and exciting offseason. Thanks for carving out the time, as always, Trevor.
Appreciate it, Paul. Anytime, man.
There he is, Trevor Sikkema, guys, of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, and it's just